Alright, so the other half of that last step with our little hands is our little feet. So I'm going to come in and do the last bits of Maia's feet. I'm not going to do the moons on her toes because there are barely any toenails. So I'm going to pull some wet out of my jar and onto my lid. I'm going to color in the entire nail bed. I'm going to come in between the toes and do some more creases. Little joints, I'm going to do those. This again doesn't change the color much, it just emphasizes the, I don't know if you can even see that there's a difference in color at all, but it just emphasizes that those are different textures and different, I don't know, highlights the shape rather. Some little creases that I didn't do before, so I'm going to come fill those few little creases in. Alright, so we have our nails done, or the nail beds done. Now we're going to do the nail tips. I'll pull this back out of the way for a second. And pull out my nail tip color. And then I'm going to get my fingernail brush. These are just itty bitty, so I'm going to just barely put anything on there. That looks kind of bright right now, but I'm going to dull it down as soon as it has a second to dry a little bit. Okay. One tiny little foot. So I'm going to catch up the other leg on this baby, and then Maia is done with all of her details and she will be ready for hair. In the meantime, I'm going to come over here and do Promise on his tiny little hands. Again, this baby is a gestational age that's smaller. The details of this gestational age, like the nail beds, have not actually really developed fully yet. So we're actually just going to come in with a little bit darker paint on the nails. I know it keeps getting darker and darker, but I promise this is realistic, and that's what we're going for. When this baby is done and assembled, and I have the clothing for him, I will do side-by-side pictures of the real Jackson and the memory Jackson, his mother asked me to include those pictures so that people can see him and remember him for who he was. So I'm excited to do that. I'm not actually going to put nail tips on the end of this baby's finger because that is not gestationally correct as far as development wise. I'm not entirely even certain that nail beds have even started growing on babies this young. I have to do a little bit of research to verify that. All right. His little elbow. My cat stole the sponge, so I'll have to come find a new sponge. And they don't exactly have a lot of fat, so creases don't really exist much either. Alright, so that is how I'm going to leave this little Jackson, his little hand. Double check that there's no gritties at the tips that I left behind. And then he's done with that, and I'll come to his little foot. And again, on those toes, just the tips of the toes and the under parts of the toes. Okay. One tiny little foot. Alright, I'm going to come in and do some details on Caleb at this kit. Like I said in my last video, the mom for this particular baby decided to get a different kit for her toddler, so this one was up for grabs, and then I had another mom contact me regarding her. So this one is now going to be an actual memory baby for a little one as well. And this one's a little tricky. She was only 22.5 weeks, so she was smaller than this, but this face matched her. So this is the kit she chose. And so she's going to be a little bit bigger than what she was in real life, but this face matches her more perfectly. So we're just going to come in on this baby and do some more of the final details on her face. I'm going to give her some modeling like we did for the others on her cheekies. little bit across the forehead. And I've already given her a little bit of details, but I'm just going to do some of these final things so that she can be seen getting some of the final stuff like the others. And a little more color on her nasal phalanges so that her face doesn't look quite so hollow. So I'm going to bring some paint up on the edges. I'm going to give a little bit of purple across the bridge to create some of that thin look. And then I'm going to come in with my white, or my cream rather, and give her a tiny milia spots like we did with the others. These kind of stick out a little bit in this part of the step, but they will get kind of faded down. Isn't she so cute? This kit always, even though it has a boy name, it always makes me think of a little girl. A couple on her nostrils. Okay, so now we're going to let that dry a tiny bit, just like we did for the other ones. And I pulled out my yellow again. I'm using the red brush that I use for pretty much everything else to get a little bit of yellow in my brush. And then I'm going to just very gently, that's too much yellow in my brush, but very gently touch these with the yellow. And then I'm going to come use this brush that's clean to very carefully just basically touch them, and it helps to sink them below the surface. So those are those details for this little nugget. I'm going to come in with the vein brush. I'm going to go back to my more pink paint and not the maroony paint, so we can do some of her veins on her eyelids. These ones disappeared already, so I'm going to come back over them. Now our tiny little ears have not been done much on this one, so I'm coming back to the thicker purple paint again so that I can do some ears on her. So I'm kind of just bouncing around to all the different steps that I showed you previously with the other ones, just so I can catch this one up to where they are, so they'll all be at the same step. I'm going to take some of the excess paint that's probably on my brush and help shade in some of these higher areas. So one little ear all done. Now that I've turned it this way though, I see a spot right in here that I didn't get the first time, so I'm going to fill that in before I forget it's there. Alright, I'm going to flip it over to this little ear. I wiped off some of my paint, so I'm not sure if the brush is full enough to completely color this side like the other side, so I'm going to have to come in with some color. One little ear looks done. Again, except for right there. Alright, so on the neck, there's some deep creases down here.